Hello everyone, it's Christina Burke, the founder of the school Bez Akcentem. This is Christopher Yeager, my husband, and we're driving from Arizona back to LA, but in reality we've been on the road for 2.5 weeks. Chris, where have we been traveling?
Through the South and, well, the deep South and parts of the Midwest for brief periods of time, and the desert, the swamps, the Great Plains, mountainous regions, and cold and hot climates of all kinds.
Yeah, I think we've pretty much covered it all. We've seen it all. The past 2.5 weeks were really incredible, and the contrast between languages, dialects and weather, it was all really, really interesting and amazing. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the accents that we heard while traveling in those states. I'm going to ask Chris a bunch of questions, and we're going to brainstorm and try to give you some examples of what we heard, and try to find some similarities between those dialects. So our first stop was Santa Fe. Santa Fe, New Mexico. Santa Fe is a cute little city-like town in New Mexico. It's right next to Arizona. It's a beautiful little historic place. There's a lot of Native American people there. Really beautiful architecture. What kind of architecture did we see there, Chris? Chris is an expert of architecture.
Many adobes. The adobe.
What are
style.
adobes?
They're clay structures. Bricks of clay, taken from the mountains and fired in kilns. Mud hut sort of style.
Mud hut. I like that. That would make a very good name for a band, right?
Yes.
Mud hut.
Mud hut.
Hello. Chris, would you say you heard a slight hint of an accent in New Mexico? And now, before we jump into our accent discussion, I want to try to identify the accent that Chris and I consider normal or neutral. So Christopher grew up in Ohio, and from all of the linguistic books that I've read and all of the language classes, all of the speech lessons that I've taken and I've taught, I've always been told, and I've always had this theory that Ohio, Illinois, Michigan, those are, the states, the middle states of America, they're referred to as Midwest. I always thought that accent was the most neutral, the most normal, so to speak. Chris, would you agree with me?
Sure. I think the way to sort of explain is that it's almost void of accent in general, and if there is a proper American accent, but as we've seen, there are far more varieties than just the Midwest. It's they're outnumbered by the accents.
Right. Did you hear any, differences between, the way you speak and the way, the locals in New Mexico spoke?
Well, I would say they're pretty neutral. There was, of course, leaving California. Californians have their way of speaking as well, but in New Mexico, I would say it was a little, if anything, a touch rural, and of course there's a lot of Native American and so they have their own dialect as well.
That I noticed that the people there speak a little slower. You know, the rhythm of the language is a little bit more laid back, maybe. And then I personally noticed that there were a lot of Native American people and people who looked like they are potentially mixed, or maybe they're of Hispanic origin. They have a different melody. I guess I want to talk more about the Native American melody. I noticed that Native American locals in New Mexico have a very interesting way to kind of stretch and change their, cadence as they stress the important words, and then the long vowels they also sing in a very different way. It sounds really good, but I don't know if I could actually show it, because
it's as if they're speaking from their throats, maybe down here, possibly.
Yeah. So that's our observations. We noticed that some Native Americans speak English
vocalization
with a different vocalization. So Chris thinks that they have this like throaty pattern, and then I think that they also, color their vowels a little bit differently. But as for the local Americans in New Mexico, people who speak English as their first language, I would say that they just speak a little bit slower, but they're pretty neutral overall.
I got left by my love in Amarillo, left by the Burger Barrel by the road.